of most of the companies integration.
Right, that's great points. Anything else you would like to add, or we should open?
One of the
open it up for
KPI, one of the KPI actually, which is adding to the same points that they mentioned, was the duplication of audit efforts.
Yeah.
When you have such a complex, multiple functionaries, you have control monitoring, you have compliance, you have risk review, you have audits. And you have more and above that, taking back to the questions that were asked, self-audit, self-risk management, self-governance, supervisory guidelines. So it's sometimes you feel it's an overkill, especially on the key risks. And then naturally you're going to get very angry flares from co-functionary. It's going to go bang my door. Sundar, what are you up to? I got 9 sets of auditors sitting on my.
So what we have done is we have started removing that word, and we left in a way where the reader has to interpret. So that has gone into another debate with the big boss, saying that for him, if you want to present to a board audit committee, he has to give some kind of opinion. So I mean, it's as we said, are we doing enough? And we are here again for the stakeholders' benefits. So we had to play a little bit of game there, wherein in our audit standard manual we said that there is no more one-word opinion. However, we give a general 1 or 2 sentence opinion, but still on the background we started giving satisfactory, and that is for what happens is whenever you go, everybody is worried about the rating, and these ratings are nowadays being carry forward towards the performance also. In certain instances where we give a satisfactory audit, the auditee used that to increase his performance, saying that in this area, so that again, the audit is again a limited scope. Yeah. So if I say network security at that moment is satisfactory, he started putting everywhere.
This is what my audit head and the auditors would come and tell me, and the simple answer is, look, there is no easy lunch, and life is not bed of roses. You must give an opinion. You must discuss it out. If there are boxing rounds, you have it. First round, second round, semi-final, quarter-final, and go to final. If you want help, I'll come to the boxing matches. But you will have to sort it out with your internal client. You will have to talk through. You will have to convince the client or your auditees that.
That's a delaying process basically.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, we have to convince.
What about you would have a.
What I believe is if there is a debate in an audit finding, that means one auditor is not good, or maybe your management is not.
No, there's no way acceptable to stakeholders. I mean, if it delays, but again there are KPIs for reporting.
Like a delay is what I start an audit now, and after discussion everything, the report gets released after 7 months, where the state of that particular event might have entirely changed.
Absolutely. So hence report cannot be delayed. It has to be finished within 30 days of the.
So it's all.
And this is constant. Believe me, what you're telling me is when the experience lasts so many years, say 15, 20 years. So, and then there is no easy. Life is not bed of roses.
Another thing, what I could add is like previously the audit standard manual gets for board approval once in a year, twice in a year. Nowadays, I can see every quarter there is some kind of changes in audit standard manual.
Very dangerous. No way.
So let me take your question when you say there is a auditor who gives a report and who says that there is a ranking in it. So if you see over a period of time, internal audit has evolved and it became a risk-based internal audit. So your auditor is also telling you that it is RBIA. So in the risk-based internal audit, definitely they have to rank different processes. For example, if they say that finance organization will be high risk, then they will say HR for me other than payroll is a low risk. So that ranking is driven, but you can always go back to your auditor where he has defined some control objective or control activity. For example, he is saying if somebody forgot to punch his card, is it like a high risk and you still paying him a salary, still payroll is getting calculated? Or if somebody has submitted 2 purchase order requisitions and has not been able to reconcile, is it like a high risk or low risk? So you have to have a discussion based on the facts that overall there is a function rating, then there is a control objective, then there is a control activity on which he is trying to say that this is high, medium, low. then he can engage with you on that discussion, because it's not that there is a one like a all set rule. You can go and say this cannot be low, this cannot be high. Yes.
I think just to share our experience, what we also had was a rating called CEI or an index, So yes, my guys also told me the same thing. When I shared this CEI, then we get into lots of debates whether it's 76 or 74 or 73 or 88 or 82. Then I said, if that is that and the CEI is important to us from a risk assessment perspective, let's keep that internal. But the qualitative rating and the opinion I cannot change. That has to be given. If it is satisfactory, it is satisfactory. If it is an unsat audit, it's an unsat audit. If it's a poor audit, it is a poor audit. That has to be given. And the overall opinion has to be given. Whether internal controls are satisfactory or risks are managed effectively has to be given. If that is not given, it's a big issue. So there is absolutely no stakeholder will agree to that. So don't tinker with your manual. Probably only thing you could tinker is the...
We have to do that. We have done it for a temporary purpose because, we had to stop giving rating.
One of the ways you could tackle this is escalate. So if the auditee is not agreeing, you go to the boss of the auditee. The boss doesn't agree, you go to the super boss of the auditee. And also auditor, the same thing. If the auditor is stuck with the auditee, then you go to the next level. You call the boss.
That's true. I mean, we were looking forward to how to...
I rarely go these days. Everything gets sorted out.
You stay out of it.
Stay out of it, absolutely.
I want to share 2 points to this, and I think those of us who have to deal with ratings, some people call it priority ratings. It's not a conclusion. It's a priority of how urgent it is. Some people say they add another dimension of complexity of implementation and things like that. But I want to bring up that while we've been talking about ratings, whether it's satisfactory, not satisfactory, 1 to 5, etc., one mustn't forget to look behind the criteria of that rating. I mean, I had a client where I did a piece of work, and when we were drafting the scope and the statement of work, he said, I want an opinion. And I said that I can't give you an opinion, I can give you the priority of all the observations. But if you, internal audit, have a framework, I'll be happy to use your framework so that it's not my rating, but taking the observations and following your framework. So he forwarded me a 1-pager that says, I think it was like good, very good, good, or satisfactory, and then something poor, right, along those lines. But what I was a bit troubled with was the criteria that led to that rating. So for example, the first tier, which is what everybody would aim to have, was like more than 80% of the controls in this process or area are working. And then the next one is less than 60 to 80% are working, and now of course 50. I said I have a bit of a concern because this seems to be a numeric count of the controls and it's not focused on the criticality of the control. And you could have what is very good, but actually that 10% or 20% are actually very essential controls. But technically it would qualify for a good rating. So to me that would be a flawed model. I think the other argument about why people are so much about fighting on ratings, this was many years ago, I had a client, nice people when I met them at the kickoff of the project, right? They were very cooperative, we worked, we discussed the issues and everything, and we say let's get the factual part of it correct. So all this discussion at that point in time doesn't tell him how many issues there are, because he doesn't know how I'm going to present it, right? And what my typical approach is to group issues, if it makes sense. I don't want to belabor a point. So for example, if it's security settings, then let's talk about configuration management versus spreading it out over 5 points. So when I presented the draft, that's where I had the uphill task of trying to finalize the report. And as we go through it, his strategy was first, I don't think this is an observation, right? Then he says, I don't think it is that serious. Then he says, why don't you try to group it? Because it's a repeat of this other point. And later on, I found out that in that organization, the bonuses of everyone was based on the number, not percentage, the number of management letter points from internal plus external audit. So being a December year-end client, I come in at the end of the year. So I am dealing with the balance that he has if he hasn't overrun his KPI. So he says, don't blame me. We are nice until it comes to this part because it impacts my bonus. So you are going to see me being a very hard negotiator. He goes to the extent I've implemented it so it's no longer an issue. There's no value in you reporting it. So I think in your challenge, you got to look and understand that overall framework of why are people so against. I mean, clearly we are not out to make people's life miserable as auditors. We are there to improve, add value. But invariably, if the organization views internal audit as a very negative reflection, then there will always be that against, you know, and which is why some organizations stays away from a rating on that, you know, because the whole rating thing is good from some expectations of stakeholders, but it needs to be a very carefully crafted one that suits that environment, I think. Otherwise, there'll be a universal rating system, which there isn't.
Another risk out here is basically if you try to challenge the auditee, you may not get all expected information to you also. It's a very thin line. You know, I mean, and that's also there. Ultimately, you're working as a consultant and you are there to improve his processes. And unless he reveal all his processes, and we have a limited time only. So it's a very challenging profession, let's put it in that way.
I will share with you the wise words of one of my very senior retired partners when I entered the profession. He says, John, in this business of audit, you need to have excellent people skills. You need to get your clients to like you. And I will tell you why, he says, right? And the words still ring in my ears. He says, inherently, in everyone, there is a desire to confess their sins. But they need to find somebody they can confess to. So if they trust you, at some point, and I will tell you for those of us who are in auditors, you do get people who are, if you are a Christian, dear Father, I have sinned, please forgive me, I'd like to tell you some things to get it off my chest. Some people do it because they want to make somebody look bad. Some people do it because they really are desperate and they want suggestions. Some people want to come clean. I think as long as internal audit in its charter, which is to help improve, offer a good cause, and of course, even with the best of intention, again, it comes back to the culture of how it treats audit findings. I think that part doesn't change.
Last to add on is the auditor should be a best salesperson also to sell the controls.
You're absolutely right. You need to sell, you need to be persuasive, you're like a salesman.
Selling ideas, selling risk management, selling controls.
Right. Just to add here, I think, you know, this is one of the key challenge what always we have from a audit perspective. We have come to one of the project. We have actually defined, you know, like the way you said, satisfactory or unsatisfactory. We have moved to another what do you call as ROIG rating. We call it as red, yellow, and
red, amber, green.
Red, amber,
we
green.
have a red, amber, green.
ROIG. So where you are going to say to always to the project manager, it is a decision taken by the business in the beginning of the project at a low margin or to penetrate into a particular market. You have inherited the risk of, you know, sales guy doing that. It is not your problem. The account could be read from the beginning itself, but you are going to show as a project manager how you improved this in the course of, you know, the whole implementation life cycle or development life cycle. So if you are able to say it is not rating of a project manager his capability, but it is on the project which had inherited the risk. Hence we always say what were the risk at the sales cycle. Bring them to the project in the first kickoff meeting and try to see, you know, how they have been resolved. And at the end, actually, the project manager every month he declares like these were the 10 top risks. How actually we are working on each of those risks. I think in the next session, me and Sundar are going to share you on the risk-based approach. I can share you, you know, how we do. We are having 10 parameters in every project: governance, technology, scope management, configuration management. How you are working on each of these things. What could be the risk? How do you really mitigate that? And then, you know, you are going to convince. And in one of the projects, we had such a embarrassing situation. We said the account is red because there is a margin as is getting eroded, or, you know, the customer is unhappy. When you have a customer discussion as a part of your audit, but the guy says it is still for me, it is amber. Then we said we are going to document and publish the report. Auditors feel it is red, but the delivery still think it's yellow, and we publish the report. Means we should be assertive to say what is our opinion and our judgment. And that is the way we have to move forward always.
And I will say the most important thing is when you are starting the engagement, what about the scoping and setting the right expectation? It needs to be, you needs to do a very robust planning. That's what I do with my clients. You tell me what is the expectation, and I want all the key stakeholder in that meeting. I don't want like somebody coming as a finance controller as telling me, I want this or you cover this, and then CFO or CEO having a different agenda. Once you set up the right expectation, your life will be easy, and you will know what you have to do and how deep and what is your coverage. So that's very, very key, where you should, everybody as in this profession should spend time and kind of like agree with the client. And I prefer doing in a like a formal manner on the mail or something. So it sets the tone also right, and then you can set up your timelines also accordingly.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
You can take
hi,
two quick questions
Yeah,
now.
this is Anand. Actually, I'm just trying to take the 2 points which came, one from John and one from Sundar. John, you talk about something called audit fatigue, which is actually happening right now. You know, being most of us have seen both sides of the thing, consulting and being other side of the table also, and something what happened in society generally. Okay, so that shows that despite having the best of the controls, best of the things can go bad. Now, what would be your suggestion to overcome this kind of fatigue? And today it's happening everywhere. Like as Prashant was saying, number of compliances to look after. Everyone is so busy with that. So much of things are happening. So what's the way out for this audit fatigue? It's something which is happening across the enterprises today everywhere. So that's what's the way out, because we have made it very complex. I know complex is good for business, for profession, but what's the way out to make it?
Want me to try? Some of the solutions you could look at is self-risk management, self-governance, and self-compliance. Again, of course, it depends on culture. Now, if culture isn't right, then how do you change it? That's again a challenge. And in fact, you could do that. So, it starts from, as he rightly said, formal processes. You formalize processes, formalize meetings, formalize schedules, formalize your whole system. Like we have a monthly control committee. So I involve a lot of people there. And the best part is that I don't sit on this chair, main chair. I make my boss sit, the CEO or the MD. So he behaves he's a completely different animal when he sits on that chair, that day and that time. I don't know what happens to him. Imagine, out and out sales guy, but totally different guy when he comes to that chair. And that's the cultural change that I've seen. That's the cultural system that that's where, this happened quite, gradually. Not initially. First 2 months was challenge, first 3 months was challenge. And it was a change of CEO for me. Change of culture, paradigm shift in management style, and unimaginable risks. So, but the whole thing changed, and today I would say it's so controlled. I don't need to worry. I'm somewhere there and somewhere offsite here. So it has to actually cultural change has to come in, and that comes from again formal systems. So you have to drive supervisory guidelines, self-compliance, self-audit, self-risk, spread it out. There's no point in hiring more and more auditors, more and more control guys, more and more risk guys. You will dry out. As you said, you will fatigue out, because your stakeholders are going to question us. How many people you have? More the harmies you have, more the problems you have. So it means less numbers, qualitative kind of work. And somebody said that it's more advisory work now, because you are helping people to do their own management, their own risk, their own compliance. So that's the key, especially in larger organizations and complex organizations. The risks that you see, the problems that you see today is more in the large organizations than in the SMEs, and because the inherent risk, I guess, is itself lesser. And the other part is the quantitative and qualitative risks. The problem that again is with controls or governance people is we think that by acquiring tools, by acquiring systems, we're done. No, we're not. It's the qualitative risk management and the qualitative audit that you do, or judgment that is there is also so key. So that's what is important. So if you roll out appropriate processes, you can change the culture. Of course, you need technology. I mean, of course, people
Just
can.
to add to Sundar, we are dealing with, let us say, 360 customers. I'm just putting an example of, in the banking field. We used to have, service division should have like Citibank coming for a audit, State Street coming for a audit, like 10 top customers, they will say, we'll come and audit how your development center is working. So we took a decision like, 3 years back that we implemented our own governance model. We say, this is the way our internal audit function works. These are the parameters on which we judge, and this is the way we give the ratings for the development or implementation or consulting or support service. If you want anything additional than this, please let us know so that we can give back. So that we minimized like a same project manager answering like some 25 audits, we made him to do it only 2 or 3 audits he will do, and then give only additional due diligence kind of thing will be done by the customers. One approach. The second one we did is, a project manager will be asking how many people I should give this data. I have to give to the finance department, I have to give to the revenue recognition department, I have to give to the top management, so many people, including auditors. So at least think of a tool which is available, which gives you a financial data, means you call it as efforts, which will be converted into financials later. So the resource management, the financial management, all these things are available in one tool, which can give you the data, in a hand. If that is implemented, at least 50% of the burden of the project manager will come down, and he will be happy to give, take the data from there. And also we thought of building a repository where actually all the artifacts of the projects are available, and he uploads, the project manager uploads, you go and take it. So no need to send 2 MB files, 5 MB files here and there.
Right.
So there is a way. I think there are a lot of ways and means. We can discuss some of these things more in the next session. I am not propagating you to come to the next session, but actually there is a lot of other 1 hour session where we can discuss in more.
I think we can take one last question.
Shall I try to answer the point about audit fatigue very briefly? I think when you have audit fatigue at the client's place, I think typically it means 2 things. One is they don't feel any value in this coming audit, which potentially means they're over-audited. 2, they may be over-audited, but the area you are auditing is coming from a different angle on that. But clearly, the approach to that is something in which if you don't pay attention, then that audit is not going to be successful because people are not going to cooperate because they're too tired, they've got other priorities and so forth. So how then to approach it? I think obviously one needs to find the root cause. The way I've done it, whenever I hear these words audit fatigue come up from a client, whether I'm in there for a one-time assignment or if I'm there for the year-on-year, it's really to look perhaps that the landscape has changed. So I give you one very quick example. An organization that previously never implemented ERM and control self-assessment, obviously the audit mode and approach year-on-year is like that. If they have implemented CSA, they have got risk assessment, has this program changed? Because if this program doesn't change, then clearly it's an added load from that perspective. To the point of a BPO organization type which is being audited from multiple customers and clients, I think there can be a discussion to look at standards such as ISA 3402, whether it serves its purpose. One of the things I found out from my client that's in managed services, right? They were telling me, John, oh, here you come again with your ISA 3402. I was the ISA 3402 auditor. My goodness, you can't believe the amount of audits we have. When we sat down and analyzed, the problem with why they are subjected to so many audits was that the sales and marketing people in all the contracts and agreement gave absolute auditing rights to the customers. So I went back to the head of MSS services. I think you need to have a chat with your salespeople because they are the one who control the floodgates of all these audit requests. And they want to close the deal. They will say yes to anything. Can I audit 10 times a year? Sure, sign here. So I think that's obviously an extreme example, but I think you need good communication. You need, to bring together the relevant stakeholders to have that constructive discussion with the same vision that everybody wants to aim for. That I don't want a position where after the discussion we have less assurance. I don't think that's what anybody wants. And obviously the appreciation of the audit activity still needs to be there and made relevant to them.
I think one last question we can take, considering the time.
Yeah, from what all I heard all this time, ultimately I come to the conclusion that it is the business requirement or the business objective which decides what should be the audit objective and what are going to be the critical areas of the business, and based on which the risk assessment has to be done and risk based auditing has to follow. And it's basically the business and two businesses within the same area of could be different because of the different kind of management, the culture and other things. So if the business risk is properly assessed, I think the auditor will do well to do the proper risk assessment, and based on which he can take the client in his fold, he can talk to the top management, tell them what is the value that addition that he will do, and the auditor also will be perceived as a value addition person to the business. This is my this total assessment of this session.
So I will like to say it's a very fair point. However, there are some limitations if you are doing a statutory audit. So as per regulation, the auditor has all right to say what is material, what is not. So again, it goes back to the scoping. So you have your profit loss account, you have your balance sheet. That's where auditor defines what are your significant material accounts. Then he does procedures on it and he comes out like whether it is effective or not effective. But if it is not like a regulatory audit, definitely yes. If you are asking an operational audit or a management audit, exactly. Business has definitely an agenda and objective, and audit has to be conducted according to that.
The regulatory framework or the regulatory requirements can never be compromised with.
Yes.
They occupy the first thing, and as Mr. Sundar also pointed out, that becomes a holy cow. Nobody can touch it. And it is for the other things. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And even John will agree with me in the same profession. Like in today's time, every client looks for a value. Yeah. It is not that it is a paper-based exercise anymore.
Of course.
If you find something, or if you found, or if you are recommending anything, advising anything, client objective is how I can do it on the ground, operationalize it, and see the value.
How is it going to add value to the business?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fair point.
Then this audit fatigue will never set in also.
I guess there are still a lot of questions, but I feel that most of the panel members will be available also for the dinner. So you will still get time to catch up with them and ask the questions. Now, just to, I don't like this to kind of end it and asking you not to ask more questions, but for the benefit of time, can I ask the panel members to take a fraction of minute each and summarize what you feel about this today's topic, or how you will summarize this, that are your audit procedures good enough to evaluate the risk in today's technology world? Prashant.
I will say definitely there is a room for improvement, and it has to be practical. And I will say businesses and even the technology, it should be like a very aligned integration which needs to happen in the ecosystem. It cannot be done in the silos. So I'm a complete believer there should be clear-cut directions, transparency, and there should be full integration, and try to bring the efficiencies in.
Okay, thank you. RR.
Yeah, we should really look from a risk-based approach. Means, what is the risk of the organization if you are not doing a particular thing, and build the controls which will help the business to enable it. Means, provide a value-added service to the business, but not looking into the financial management perspective. Means we have to keep the financial management always as the backbone. Means even if the business says I don't want, we cannot leave it. We have to keep the financial as the backbone and make some modification when doing a scoping for a particular audit. Hence, lot of improvement, as he said, there is a lot of scope for improvement. We have to learn from the best practices what is available in the industry, adopt some of them, and then take it forward.
Yeah, thank you. John?
I would say maintain the view of the risk landscape, because it's constantly changing and evolving. Keep yourself up to date in terms of what are the standards and regulatory requirements, which is also evolving at an even more rapid pace. And as a plug for ISACA, the ITAF IT Assurance Framework there's an exercise that's been going on for the last 2 years to integrate ITAF with the existing professional standards and guidelines that we currently have today. Added on to that, the outputs that are coming up from the Guidance Practice Committee, and depending on the area you're auditing, look towards our partners. If you're doing privacy, look towards the Privacy Association. If you are doing cloud, further to what GPC has produced, you may want to look at Cloud Security Alliance and what they produce. But the point is, look towards the relevant partner, BPC, Business Continuity Planning, look towards the relevant organizations, so that you are then able to, on reasonable effort, do a competent scoping and job in terms of delivering your charter.
I think I have nothing more to add. Other than that, I think the gentleman here summed it up